Welcome back to Mindful Notions, where we help young people do more with less. I'm, as always, your host, Sam Lee, joined by my co host, Hillary and Austin. We will catch our other co host, Megan, next time. She is, I think, still in Thailand or still traveling, and
Cambodia.
she'll
Cambodia.
Cambodia.
Wow.
And she'll have many fun stories for us next time on who she might have met while she was over there. But in the meantime, we have fun trips of our own to recap. We've all been traveling a little bit. And this side, we'll be recapping China, which Hillary and Austin just went to, and London, which I just went to. So let's start with China. Hillary and Austin, can you just recap all the different places you went to in China? Because you guys went to a lot, and I don't know all of them myself. So this will be good for everyone involved.
Okay, so this is basically like that one song where it's like all the countries of the world, but I guess we technically went to Beijing because we flew in through there, but then landed in Guangzhou to start off with. It would end up being our home base as we ended
Okay.
up using as the connector hub. So Guangzhou down to Hong Kong, then to see Macau for a day, then back to Hong Kong, then through Shenzhen for about 15 to 30 minutes, back to
Okay.
Guangzhou, then taking the train to Guilin, then taking the train to technically Guiyang,
Okay.
but then through Guiyang to Chongqing, to Chengdu, and then back to Guangzhou. And then we flew back through Tokyo, so technically adding that as well.
And how long was this trip in total?
2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks. It was about like
Okay.
11 days there, and then you're adding a couple days on the other side.
Yeah, we had two 24-ish hour traveling days. So
Okay. And Hillary, you were documenting a lot of these travels through TikTok. And could you talk a bit more about the inspiration behind that and why you chose to use TikTok over other platforms, and also what you were able to capture and what you feel like the TikTok doesn't capture, both sides?
yeah, I mean, I think documenting was generally just wanting to remember the trip and being aware of all the sites that we were seeing. It was a whirlwind of a trip, as you may be able to expect through the number of places that we visited, but also it was just really packed. And when things are that packed, it's easy to just live in the moment and kind of experience it fully and then not really be able to recount it later on. So that was kind of the thinking behind it. Another aspect, a slightly ulterior motive, was I know that I want to begin building my social media platform, not platform, or social media platform.
Your presence, your social media
my
presence.
presence, correct.
Already
My
have
presence
begun.
as a public figure after coming back in order to help promote my startup that I'm building. So I kind of viewed this as just getting myself into the habit of posting, getting comfortable with making videos. When it comes to why TikTok in particular, it honestly came from a suggestion from some of my friends who are creators who just said it's pretty easy to just edit in TikTok. And in my view, like I am trying to keep this as sustainable, as easy as possible. So I was like, okay, I'm just record in my photos and then just put it into TikTok. And then it was actually a really nice activity because at the end of the day, we would go through, I would basically put everything into TikTok, kind of auto cut them. We would literally choose like the first audio suggested by TikTok, and like we would make like some revisions if we felt like it didn't align. But at the end of the day,
Oh, so Austin had creative input in these TikToks.
I was like the creative voice, yeah.
A little bit. As much creativity as one could say by recording and then just putting it into TikTok. But yeah,
Yes,
it was
the
a nice
recorder.
thing to look back on at the end of the day and be like, oh wow, we like did a lot during the day. So.
Yeah, and this was China trip, so TikTok, China themes.
That being said, when I lost service because I ran out of data at the end, I was not actually able to access TikTok. So hence some of my vlogs were delayed until after I came back to the United States.
But are they all up now? Those delayed vlogs?
They are all up now. Correct.
Okay. And what's the handle on TikTok if people want to find you?
Shout it out.
Just Hilzen8, my typical HILZN8.
Yep. Yes. That's your Substack too, if people want to check that out as well. Yeah, I would know. I tag it a lot.
It's a whole brand identity.
Yes. Why 8? Besides it being a lucky number, at least in Chinese.
Because it's a lucky number, Sam. I made this in middle school. I couldn't put my full name. I needed a number. I chose a lucky one. Comes down to that.
That was just your Georgetown thing.
No.
Yeah, no. What were your numbers for Georgetown? Your email?
HNZ3. Austin is
Mm,
a fake fan. He does not know what's going on here.
yeah, we've never emailed
Yes, we have.
like once or twice. I always have to ask for
I
it.
continue to email you.
Well, why would you
Anyways,
have
we'll
two
put that
different
on.
ones?
We'll put that on hold for now.
And you guys both look like you have fresh cuts. Was that in China or the States?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Fresh cuts and fresh bruises.
I think it added up to less than $30 for the two of us with
Wow.
a little tip, which is not customary in China. So
Mhm.
yeah, Austin was a little
Yeah.
scared. He told me that men care a lot about haircuts and it really impacts their identities and how
Mm.
they view themselves. So he was really concerned about going into honestly a random hair salon that we passed by. But I said, no, take the risk. When we're in China, we have to take advantage of the services. And he did great. He loved it. I loved my haircut. We were there for like an hour. It was awesome. You can't do that in the US.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was just, you know how there's a lot more potential effects for a guy than a girl. I think.
I could see
also-
that.
And also, like it was in Chinese, which was the difficult
Y-
part. Although I ended
yeah.
up having a conversation with my haircut person, talking about politics. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, I was
Okay.
scared he was gonna mess me up after that, but it was okay.
Ominous.
Yeah, clearly it was the opposite. I get it. I think it's easier to like fuck up a guy's haircut and make it look bad than I feel like, but hair is important for both sides, I would say.
It is.
I think I've seen worse cuts on
Yeah.
men. Like the potential is there. Yeah. Yeah. What's surprising about China? I feel like that is usually what's on people's minds these days, at least in America. It's so I don't know, it can be such a monolith in our minds or the way we talk about it. So what's surprising for you guys from that trip?
I feel like what's not surprising, not there's this. It's funny. There's this whole like almost archetype now of article that people write where it's like, I went to China. Now let me talk about China. And someone
Yeah.
will go for like a week and then they make a whole manifesto about the country and their new experience
Yeah.
of it. So we'll do the same basically right now. I think two things that stood out to me the most was one, it's just a lot of people. You realize that as
Yeah.
you go,
A bit of a caveat here. We went over like the Labor Day holiday,
We did.
which is one of like the busiest travel periods for China. So that's.
But I
you know.
was more referencing just like you see the amount of apartments, you see the size of the cities. We went to Chongqing, which I did not know. Thought it was just like that one futuristic city that everyone has on Instagram. But then it's actually China's biggest city with over 30 million people, which is
Wow.
like bigger than most countries. So, you always compare it to the US in terms of like size. Oh, they're the similar size, similar big powers, but it has like triple the amount of people. So, you really realize that as you go there, where there's just so much you can do within it that it kind of adds just a depth to it of we were talking about developing economy versus the high tech nature of it, and that really adds a layer to that. I think the second thing to me was I was very interested going into it, thinking about the AI, thinking about the tech spheres. As she said, there's a whole tech ecosystem where if you don't have access to Western data or international data, you're kind of cut off from everything else. You have to use Douyin, Doubao, Alibaba, all of these, WeChat. But surprisingly, in all of our conversations, coming from the West, or at least the US, there's this whole almost China shock, China fear going on. It's like we need to develop our AI because China is really good. And not only that, China's super optimistic. They're putting it into everything like robots, into, there's every sector imaginable. But we went there, we talked with a lot of Hillary's family. We talked with, high school teachers at a school that we toured. And
Oh,
pretty
wow.
much, except for one person who almost worked at Huawei.
Got an offer. But
Got
just
offer,
turned it down
turned
to
it
work
down.
at a high school.
Except for that one person, I'd say the vast majority of people either did not care about AI or said that they thought Chinese AI was way worse than American. So it was like a very
Wow.
flipping the script of what you hear here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with what Austin said, but not to be too contrarian because Austin has been calling me out for that recently. I think it is very different But honestly, one of my takeaways from the trip was realizing actually more the similarities and the differences. I think a lot of it came from just realizing that China is a place where real people live and exist.
You heard it here
And
first.
okay, look, I know it's like
Groundbreaking.
kind of a crazy thing to say, I know. But I think what I really mean by that is I think a lot of narratives, like kind of the ones that Austin mentioned about like I visited China and like these are all the crazy things I saw. Like you're basically making China into a concept, into this like alien, like outside thing that is everything that the US isn't, right? And like, you know,
Yeah.
there's some truth to that narrative, right? I'm not gonna like dispute that. But on the other hand, like I think being there really helped me just understand how China is at the end of the day just like a culture, a people, an economy. You know what I mean? Like
Politics.
yeah, politics, yes, but also like so much of like what we saw there, like, and this is a big, honestly, like props to my dad for all that happened on the trip. He talked to a lot of people there, and like hearing those conversations really gave me insight into how, yeah, some people are taxi drivers, yeah, some people are selling fruit in a tourist destination, yeah, some people are teachers, but at the end of the day, they live their lives in China. They've been there, you know, most of them for their whole lives, just existing and leading a normal life, like eating food, ordering taxis, buying cars if they can afford it. And it's, you know, in many ways, like not that dissimilar to just the way that people live. At the end of the day, it's just like a
Yeah.
place where people live, much like what the US is. And I think being there for 2 weeks, and also like probably helpful to be there with family as well, where it's like, yeah, these are people I know, although mostly vaguely, who actually exist there. That helped really make that insight very real for me.
Yeah. What's the dynamic of traveling, Hillary, with a parent and a boyfriend? I feel like that's something that a lot of people think about, especially in relationships. But what was it like to, especially meeting other family? Like, how were they viewing you in Austin? And just what was the whole dynamic?
Oh yeah, Austin was great. It was me and Austin against the world over there.
Wow.
It was Austin alone
Austin against the
the world.
world.
I was on his shoulder essentially because Austin was the go-between. He has in my entire family on WeChat. He is able to communicate with them in Chinese while I did it, and my dad doesn't use WeChat, despite everyone else in China using WeChat. So Austin was
Wow.
the go-between for the three of us. Plus,
Wow.
we're using Austin's no foreign fee credit card. So he was ordering
Wow.
everything, Alipay, Didi. Thank you very much, Austin. So basically, he was a rock for me, certainly, but also for my dad, because without him,
I
my
love
dad would
that.
have been dishing around cash. And as he realized the very first day that he was in China, the taxi driver he tried to pay in cash was like, I do not have change for you. No one here carries cash anymore. So
Yeah.
it was honestly great. Like it was not awkward or weird at all. And I think that's because, yeah, I don't know. It was, there were definitely weird dynamics on the trip, but I think Austin and I were a package.
Yeah, it was awful.
Oh.
Half kidding. No, it was like a full time. It was sort of like a full time job in terms
Yeah.
of, and maybe this is always the experience of being the slightly outsider of the trip, but I feel like it was a part time job of psychiatrist where you had
Mm.
interfamily bickering, and then I'm just there trying to cool tensions. And then also, yeah, that one weird dynamic of her dad not using WeChat and Hillary
Yeah.
ghosting her family. And so I just became the interlocutor of every single member of her family. I'd be sitting there with her and her dad, and I'd be the one telling her uncle, her cousin, her aunts that we're like 5 minutes away, we're almost there, all of those things. Very strange circumstance.
Yeah, wow. Austin is the surprise interlocutor there. Would not have expected that. But also, I'm not fully surprised. I could see his personality lending itself to that. Do each of you feel inspired at all to apply what you've learned or experienced in China to scaffold and compete respectively? Or was it more of this personal trip that of course informs who you are as a person as you continue with your endeavors, but isn't as like directly related to what you guys are working on?
I can start. There was definitely a lot of pressure for us to incorporate elements of this trip into our writing, not least from my family. Like my dad, the whole time was like talking to me in Austin. He was like, "You should be writing at least 10 articles about your time here in China." And like generally that side of the family, a lot of them are writers, so they were like, "Yeah, you can write
Okay.
a lot of pieces on this."
He was like, take a photo of this, and this photo can go in your article.
Yes, he would be pointing to places. I speak for myself. I'll let Austin answer for himself, even though I think I have a sense of what he would say. I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna write anything direct about it. It just feels like both all and nothing at once. It's kind of like what we were referring to earlier, those two dually narratives, where on the one hand is a completely different like cultural, technological, political context that is like so different that it's like difficult to grasp. But on the other hand, it's just mundane. It's just like it's people's lives and like what is there to sensationalize about that. So I think I think my takeaway from the trip is just being able to hold those two truths at once, honestly, to see China as like to not just see, because you can say like obviously those things are true, right? You can see that about any country, about any nation, any people. But I think it's like having my own understanding of that is the main takeaway from my trip. And like you said, Sam, like that will inform me as a person, my writings going forward. But in terms of writing directly about it, I don't really see myself doing that right now.
Yeah, totally fair. Austin?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking the same thing as your dad every single day would look at me and be like, "This is the article right here."
Wow, he's really encouraging of the articles.
And you know, it was complicated because you know I've started writing Compute, which is very AI tech geopolitics focused. I feel like I should write something, although it's not something I'm doing right now actively. But maybe I will. Although, like Hillary said, I think it's just a lot of background, context, and knowledge that will stay in my head moving forward, and maybe how I articulate certain articles or certain perspectives is now carrying this awareness of, you know, multiple worlds outside of just the U.S. perspective, multiple lived realities, all of that, and also I might be becoming an influencer. So
one thing I might add on to that quickly though is that even though I don't know how this will inform my writing per se, it has actually already been informing my reading. I think before I was honestly pretty turned off to things that are like China this, China that, US China this, US China that. But now I think I'm a lot more curious about reading those things because, like I said, before this trip, it was easy to just see China as this abstract reality. But now that I have a clearer sense, like I'm more curious to use that understanding to then like read and counter these arguments. So I've been reading more stuff about China, and like the stuff that I'm reading, even the more sensational stuff, like I start to understand a little bit where they come from. And that's been interesting. It makes me more curious about this. So I think this will inform my intellectual pursuits going forward.
Yeah, and I feel like US-China is one of those topics where it becomes bigger than just the relationship between the two countries. Like it's about the economies, the cultures, the technologies. Like it becomes things that invariably everybody is thinking about, whether you are just living your life in the US or China or very involved in these issues. So that makes a lot of sense. I asked that question because I wrote about my time in London. So I was curious if there were going to be complimentary pieces, but I spent last Wednesday through Sunday in London. There were two main reasons I was there. First was because our podcast, Mindful Notions, was nominated for an award. We did not win, but thank you everyone for voting. We appreciate the support. And I think we're supposed to say it's an honor to be nominated, which it is, but just the right thing to say. And congrats to all the winners. But it was a great ceremony. It was really good to talk to Giles as well, who runs the whole thing, runs the podcast festival on Notion, which is very impressive. So very good to see him and say congrats to him and his team. It really was just a great atmosphere at Clapham. And then the second reason was because since I was already going to London, the Notion community there hosted an event that week. And they did this low-key spring clean event where they had an ambassador demo custom agents, which is one of our latest features. And I also was able to speak a bit at the beginning about what the ambassador program was, welcome everyone, and of course, shout out the ambassadors since they're the ones that host the events, and then just meet the ambassadors themselves. And then I was actually able to meet someone at the London community event who is in New York this week. So I invited her to the office today, and I saw her today in New York. So it was like a very nice crossover. Another good crossover. This speaks to the power of Notion as a brand, but one of the lunches I had in Soho there, I was just randomly sitting next to this girl. We were both at this banh mi spot, and we just got to talking. And I swear, guys, I did not bring up Notion as the first day. I never do because I have a life outside of it. But we did eventually get to Notion because, like, you know, what do you do for work and all of that. And she is probably part of this good majority that just views Notion still as a note-taking app, which we get. And in a past life we were, but now we're trying to be this all-in-one AI workspace. So I was like, no, like, that's cute, but we're all these things. And she was like, wow, I didn't know Notion could do all these things, which is like the best statement to hear always. It never gets old. And then I invited her to the community event that night, and she was able to come because she was going back to Leeds, which is 2 hours train from London. And we were able to see each other again. So there have been these like double crossovers, which have been nice. And then, yeah, I just wrote about, it was a very, like, honestly hard piece to write because it felt very boring by the end. I just felt like I was listening a lot, but that was kind of the point of just showing the breadth of what I did, because I felt like, as I'm sure you guys know as well, when you travel internationally, like, so much happens every day where you're like, how am I going to process this? And I think short form videos are a great thing, or I was posting notes as well as Substack, but honestly, I always didn't put it out because it just felt really boring to me. But then I think once I put it out, especially my family was like, okay, great. Like, you did so many things, now we know. And I was like, okay, good. There's a purpose for this. So that was London. And I don't know if you guys had the chance to see the piece at all, but curious what you thought about it, about the London trip as a whole. And yeah, anything I can report back about the state of London.
Yeah, I mean, you've been there a few times at this point.
Yeah.
I guess it's interesting to me because I know that Megan lived in London for quite a while, and she was part of that like startup tech scene there, and she has her thoughts on that. But I guess like, especially given that you were there for some like a professional reason as well at this point, related to tech and startup as well. What do you make of that landscape?
Yeah, I was talking to the Notion community about it, and they were talking about how startups were quite strong in London. But I got the impression from Megan when we went that she didn't feel like it was strong enough compared to New York or SF. And she could, of course, speak for herself next time, but that's why she's in New York and then going to spend more time in SF this summer. So I feel like it's definitely strong in Europe, but I think I get the sense that despite a lot of talent being in these big European cities, they're still weighed down by regulations like GDPR and then all the subsequent ones, especially small and medium businesses and freelancers, because they're the ones get the most confused of like what they can do, what they can't. And then as a result, they don't take as many risks, I would say, with tech versus enterprises, the legacy ones. I think they have figured out most of the regulations, but they're still just inherently not going to take a risk of like migrating everything to Notion necessarily, unless it's a really easy migration or it makes a lot of sense. Like, I just get the sense that there's more guardrails in the tech scene over there, and that might just be an American bias, but yeah, that's how I felt when I was like observing and just learning more about the tech culture, at least in Europe as a whole.
As someone who's not super familiar with that landscape, could you just give a little more insight into like what these regulations kind of are inhibiting? Like, I would assume like data privacy, for example, is one thing, right? That probably would implement and like, you know, sort of translate between different things. But I don't know, are there other things that are sort of inhibiting?
Yeah, and also if you could also talk a little bit about how you saw those guardrails, so that feeling of having guardrails. Like,
yeah, I think it's even the individual. Like, every time you make a Google search, you have to reject cookies. Like, the minute you put in a Google search, it's like accept or reject cookies every single time. Like, there's no memory, so it feels like there's even friction in the individual user experience. And I guess it's just like a constant reminder of what you're opting into, which is nice, but also, again, annoying. And especially if you're thinking about workflows and how to operate businesses, that kind of friction can add up. I think data privacy is definitely a big goal. And especially places like Germany, they won't even put like the event address anywhere. Like you have to register. Like it's by default. I think like you register and then you see the address. Versus a lot of events in the States and other places, like you'll see the address and that will factor into like your consideration of going or not. And I think yeah, it's not just around data privacy, like security of data, but I think that invariably clashes sometimes with like a product like Notion, which has agents and now even more like workers capabilities, where security is something that, of course, like we're thinking very heavily about and like thinking as much as we can, but no one really knows what the boundaries and guardrails should be with AI broadly. Like that's just an industry wide problem. It's not a company specific one. So it just makes people who are already hesitant and wary about security and tech even more. But again, it inhibits them from being, in my opinion, like as innovative as maybe some American companies or groups.
Go for it.
I was gonna say that's super interesting, especially because for there's one specific app I use a decent bit called Twitch. It's that video live streaming platform, and I notice when I go into a certain, even in the U.S., a state versus other states that pop up with, do you opt into this? Do you not opt into this? And for
Yeah.
that, my initial reaction is always like, oh, that's nice. They care about my data here. But then I can see, there's obviously degrees to that where you get, more than just one pop up or with every single thing. That was an interesting case. And I remember when you initially, I think it was for your piece for me in Atlas, you had written initially when you were back in DC about the responsible AI ecosystem and
Yeah.
how I think you were talking about connectors and how
Yeah.
that was even before agents blew up. But now with agents blowing up, it sort of feels like AI and agents are opposed to privacy. But maybe they'll find a way to make it work. Who knows?
It's tricky, right? Because I feel like what we're seeing at Notion is that AI and agents work better when they have access to more of your information. So from like a user privacy point, you might be like, well, what if I don't want agents to have access to specific things? That's totally fine. But again, from I think like a business or org perspective, it becomes more nuanced where certain things, yeah, should remain silent and private, but your agents will work better the more context it has. And especially as your company grows and more like groups are being formed, think about all the work that won't be duplicated. It's just like, hey, I'm thinking about like to the agent, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Has somebody else already done it? And the agent can like report back if there's another group that's already working on it or not. Like I see it a lot more now, but again, I think at the individual privacy level, there's going to be different concerns. It's just that I think people are still viewing AI and agents as very much like personal single player, when the reality is that the most powerful ones are moving to multiplayer and trying to benefit like entire, sometimes like multi-thousand enterprises. So it's just a different frame of thinking that requires its own considerations. But sometimes people like conflate the two, I think, is like the issue.
Yeah, go for it. No, you go.
I was going to say, it reminds me of an article I shared in the group, a little AI group chat the other day, of a person who was trying to experience the future or buy into the future. And by doing that, he just had a bunch of AI agents, gave them all of his personal information, everything, including his money, all of that, and just let it plan his life, every single detail of it. And so it would like email people, call people, and set up meetings that it would tell them of them day of, and like, you're just meeting with this guy. It would buy things for him, all of that. And who knows where the privacy is?
What I was gonna ask actually is like, thinking about China, right? One of our takeaways from the trip is like everyone here, everyone in the U.S. talks about China as this like AI giant in one way or another. Right? It's like, oh my AI, like there are robots everywhere, right? But then we go and it's like, okay, like the teachers were like not really paying attention. But like certain teachers, when we were talking about AI, were literally just like looking around. Like they did not really have thoughts about it. I did not seem to really care about it. When we asked about like using AI in their teaching, they were like, yeah, like it could help cut down on our workload, I guess, which is, pretty typical reaction, right? Like in the US as well. And I guess I just wanted to also like contextualize similarly this tech discussion that we're having about the UK and London, right? Like we're obviously, we started by talking about this tech landscape, but you obviously did more than just purely exist in these tech spaces, right? You were in like a podcasting space, you were going around eating different things, experiencing different things across London. So like, what is your sense of like, what is the role of like the tech scene in London? Is it like sort of largely removed from other people's lives, or people like talking about AI and tech like in their regular conversations? Like, how do we contextualize that in this different international environment?
Yeah, I feel like most people were not talking about tech, and that might be. I was about to say that might be like a European thing, but it sounds like it's happening just around the world, which makes me feel like it's something we've identified in the US, but most people don't like AI. And I think a lot of it comes from like not understanding, again, like conflating maybe different ways to use it or getting wrong information. Like I think there was a stat in Empire of AI by Karen Howe, which go to any bookstore, you'll see it. And it was about like water usage of AI, and she was off by the scale of 1,000 times, I think. Like she cited a figure that it was using 1,000 times more than it actually was. Like that's pretty significant because it's a popular book and a lot of people not believe that, and it's kind of like it's what it is until we get more information out there. So I feel like it's things like that where generally I would assume the average, maybe let's even just say like global citizen of the developed world, is probably a little skeptical, if not downright critical and anti-AI. But I think that most people, on the other hand, just want to figure out like how to work better as well, and AI does factor in. So I think it's kind of, maybe it comes more from personal use of AI, because I think that's why education is in such a crisis, because like so many students are using it, because it's a means to an end. It's not like they are so passionate about AI that they like want to use it, and that's more like the techies. I think it's just because like, oh, like ChatGPT can write my essay, and no one cares enough to really do much about that, so I'm gonna do it. So I think generally, based on the conversations I had with people, like they just want to talk about life and not really tech, especially. And this speaks so dear to my heart. London has a huge beer culture. There's people drinking beers everywhere. There's pubs. And I read about it in the piece, but there's a thing called Thirsty Thursdays that my colleague was telling me about, where people just stand on the street, like within the perimeter of a pub, and they just drink and smoke, and it's great. And I'm like,
Sounds amazing.
it's the best. And I was only able to experience it for a bit of time, but it's like ringing in my memory. And there's like a picture of me where I'm drinking beer, and it's like, it just feels me, and it feels like a good time. Yeah, it was a good time.
We saw that in Hong Kong, except for there was like an open fire on the street. So, maybe that's the Hong Kong version.
Yeah,
one thing I want to add to that was, we're talking about all this from a consumer perspective. It's like the individual perspective. And one thing that I've learned from, my quasi finance job is that apparently all the money is in B2B, business to business.
Yeah, it is.
That's where much of the GDP of countries are. That's where much of enterprise, much of actual work happens. Isn't when people are like out of their 9 to 5. It's a weird thing what we're doing right now, especially literally right now, doing a podcast outside of our 9 to 5. Sorry. It's a strange thing compared to, I think, what most people in the world have, which is like you work your job and then you enjoy life. And so I think that's another interesting thing is if we're looking at AI adoption or attitudes towards AI, maybe it's also wrong to be looking at how people think about AI instead of looking, there's reasons to look at that. But specifically in terms of AI adoption, maybe it should be looking at businesses, enterprises. I think that's one thing that always interests me is people always say that stat about, China of, oh, there's so much AI adoption, robots everywhere. But one interesting reason because of that is because there's a lot of government pushing it, saying there must be AI adoption. Whereas I think if you see in the US, you don't hear anything about the government. But I would wager a guess that there's much more business adoption in the US. You hear about every day of companies trying to use AI, maybe not
100%.
using it
Yeah.
well, but trying
Yeah.
to use it, even firing people to use it, quote unquote. Um,
Yeah.
and and I wonder, I guess, where if this goes into what you're saying about the Europe tech scene, where because there's so much concern about these regulations, where maybe there isn't that ability to start having the enterprises pivot towards that. And then also, like, I mean,
Yeah.
the government's not really going to do what China is doing, which is just forcing them to do it.
Yeah. I definitely think that comes into play. I think the money is 100% in B2B. It doesn't mean that B2C or even models like B2C to B don't matter. It's more just like you can't get around it financially. And I think what we're seeing, how that relates like tokens and credit pricing, sometimes
100%.
companies make decisions based on like the financial sense before the technical sense. Like I'm going to broaden it because I think a lot of companies have this dilemma where their models are costing them so much money where they have to start charging like more and more for their credits. But technically speaking, there's not a current standard of like why would a credit cost this amount versus another amount. Like you're just trying to make financial sense of it, but then you're gonna again invariably price out the individuals because it's who's going to be able to pay for those credits for you to continue running your business. It's going to be other businesses. So I think it just becomes tied up into just inevitable economics. But again, I think that's why people sometimes hate AI because they're like, why does it seem like it's becoming such a money decision? But I think we're only going to see the convergence more between like decisions that need to make as much financial sense as technical sense. Like I think when this wave started in late 2022 and then 23, 24, most of the decisions made of like when to launch models were based on like the technical capabilities. But I think these days it's a blend of like the technical capacity, but also the financial capacity for either these businesses or the VCs that back them to fund it, or their consumers, which should be a mix of businesses as well now, depending on how big they are.
That's actually a super interesting point I've never really thought about. Like now that I think about it and look back on it, it definitely felt like
oh my god! Sorry guys. Sorry. Hit the table.
Really did not like what I was saying.
I know.
The past
keep going.
3 years did kind of feel like a playground. I mean, I know we've had this in a previous discussion where I think it was when we were just starting and charting our courses of how we experienced AI. We were saying like the first time we used it, it felt like a gimmick. But that definitely was how I used to feel about it. But maybe it's because of the context I'm now thinking about it. It definitely feels now much more like, oh, it's expensive. You have limits. You use it as much as kind of you can get out of it, and then that gets cut off. And now it's much more tied to that financial. So I think you're right that there is some, maybe once the money catches up, then the more technical can come back, the more freedom, the more creative, etc. But another question for you. One thing I've been thinking about a lot is, the current geopolitical moment in Europe. There's a lot of talk about Europe being different, Europe changing, Europe turning away from the US. I've talked to European academic and think tank friends, and they kind of, and my question to them is always, does it feel like, after 4 years, it'll turn back to the same thing, or is this like a serious rupture? So you've been going for a couple years now. I wonder if you've seen any difference, whether it be just in the way people generally are, in the way enterprises are. I mean, Notion's a US tech ecosystem, and nominally there's talk right now about like tech independence, tech sovereignty. So how have you seen that develop and how it is now? Does it seem like it's more European as opposed to like Atlantic, or what do you think?
I think until European tech companies have their own foundational large language models, they can't get that far from the US or China. Like US and China dominate with their LLMs, and you can't build on things right now unless you use foundational LLMs like your Claudes, your or your Minimaxes or DeepSeek from China's side. So I think until then, it's kind of more talk. I feel like they can't escape it, and I think until they have their own LLM to compete with, they're kind of bound to US and Chinese models, which again give those two countries an advantage. That being said, I don't think I've spent that much time thinking about the geopolitics when I'm there. I think when I go back to China, I think anti-American sentiment definitely comes up, like both from top down, but also just even when I see my grandma scrolling on WeChat, it's like this influencer in New York, like I'm in New York at 10 p.m. and it's dangerous and it's scary. I don't feel safe. Like, don't come to the US. And I'm like, wow, I wonder how many of these videos are being made every day. But I think in Europe, it's more just like, it feels like there's a bigger separation between work and life, which I think plays into how much you're going to talk about politics and so on. But I will say one exception. I had this excellent dinner at this Tunisian street kitchen on Lower Marsh Street in South Bank where I was staying. And this group of 20-somethings kind of reminded me of us guys for having this very opinionated debate about politics and like jail systems and prisons and justice. And I was like, okay, so it does happen. So probably like if I went to Oxford, right? Or like if I went to an academic thing, which, you know, we could check out if we all did London. I'm sure it'd be a little different, but outside of that, yeah, didn't really hear much. So I'm curious, would you guys ever live in China long term? And if the answer is yes, like where are we living? What are you doing occupation wise? Do you have a dog? Do you have a family? Like what's happening here?
You want us to paint a picture?
Yeah. If the answer is yes, you can also say no.
It's a great question. I mean, I think we were talking about it a little bit. I mean, there are certain things that are undeniable in terms of conveniences. It is so convenient there. Partially just because of price disparity, but partially because of things just work well. Like there's the price disparity of like DDs, which are their Ubers, so cheap. And it's instantaneous, and we're talking about the like supply dynamics of that. But there's so many people doing it. It's instantaneous and cheap. Food is cheap. You know, the government. This is something I heard the other day, where people talk about the fact that in political science, political theory, that democratic systems, they're good because if there's people who are upset, then you can just vote out the old governments. And that's the bad thing about China. It doesn't have that system. So if they mess up, it cracks. But because of that, there's a way you can phrase, or you could say that they're much more keen on what needs to be done than in the US. Just let it, slip up. And so their infrastructure systems, amazing. High-speed rail. We got back here to New York at JFK, took the tram, and it felt like, a century before that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
There's a lot of conveniences. I don't know. What do you think?
I think a thought that I had on my trip was like, whenever I saw a young person texting on their phone or like scrolling on their phone, which is obviously a very common like phenomenon like across the world, right? But in China, whenever I saw that, I was just like, I wish I were you, like, but I'm not. And like I say that anecdote just to like emphasize.
What does that mean?
Well, like there's a 12-hour time difference plus the firewall, right? And like because of my data issues, I couldn't reach anyone.
Yeah.
So it just like so in my head I couldn't conceptualize like the thought of like using WeChat to like text all of my friends, or like using like Xiaohongshu, like Rednote, or like using Douyin or those things. You know what I mean? Like that's just like a completely different ecosystem. So it was that particular like image in my mind that just like showed me how like like everything that Austin said, like that makes China and like some areas more than others like livable. But then I think about like actually living, and I think about like the networks that I'm so tied to, obviously physical friends, but like also these like very nebulous ones, like ideological, social, cultural, that like I think are just really hard to escape. Like I came out of the trip like proudly as like an Asian American, like not
yeah,
like,
you did. ABC.
Like,
ABC.
Exactly. Okay, Austin, we can relax now.
I'm,
But
I'm an ally.
but yeah,
Austin's an ally.
I'm in that middle there. So
Yeah, long story short,
Diplomatic answer.
Hong Kong is pretty nice. Except for from the people we talked to in Hong Kong, which is kind of just one person. Didn't seem like he thought it was going in the right direction.
Okay.
what about you? I know you wrote about it, and actually, I was going to ask you about that in terms of livability. Like, what are your views on London's livability for yourself?
Yes, I think London's the first city abroad that I could seriously see myself living for at least like 6 months to a year. I'm USA through and through. I know I'll settle down here, and I mean, the States has so many flaws that we could literally never stop talking about it, but it also has freedom, and like, I don't know, it's hard to give up.
Flaws.
There are flaws, but I just like, there are so many things that make this country like home, I think, to me at this point. And
Oh no, I meant there are flaws.
oh yeah, they are our flaws. Yes, that is a confusing word in the English language. But I think the reason why I think London's the first city after visiting about 10 or so countries quite differently across like Latin America, Africa, Asia, Europe. I think first, just they speak English. That does make a huge difference. Like, because I think my first question, at least in this phase of my life, is like, okay, like what would I do for work there? And to work, it just will be easier to speak English. And I just really feel like London's a great mix of DC and New York. Like, I don't know how accurate that comparison is, but DC kind of brings the culture and New York brings the capitalism in my head. And London has the history more than the States, of course. So you have like the museums and the old but beautiful architecture, but also has like the big skyscrapers that you don't really get in DC. And I also think that the London food scene is a little slept on. I don't think amongst at least Asians it has like the best reputation, but it has solid Indian food, broader Asian food. Dishoom is like one of the best rated Indian places there, both breakfast and dinner. I went for breakfast; it was really good. And then I will say, like, after considering work, so I'd probably be like still in tech and doing something related to that, which there's plenty in London. I would say living wise, like I just need access to tennis courts, and there were so many tennis courts at Battersea. It was like tennis court after tennis court, and the sun was shining, and it was next to like this renovated power plant.
Yeah,
that's
that's
what
not
the Battersea area is. Yeah, that isn't normal. And I was like, oh, I could, like, it just popped into my head. I was like, I could live here. I see an apartment that is probably exorbitantly priced. I would hopefully find a good deal, and then just play tennis, take the Northern into the city, shop in Soho. So honestly, not that different from New York, minus the tennis court access, and that goes into London's favor. So maybe we'll do an episode. We'll do another episode in London at some point. We'll do another festival, and we can all rendezvous.
So you give this great rating, but one thing I'm curious about is, we talk a lot about New York specifically as having this grind mentality, this, us as Gen Z having this grind mentality of working. And then previously we were talking about London and Europe in general having this, you have your 9 to 5 and then you're done. And there's this separation. Do you think that would affect you or get to you? Do you think it would be good for you?
I think at some point it would be good for me. I feel like that's why I would only see myself in London for a year. Like, I wouldn't stay for longer. I guess that's what I mean by living there. I view living as more than a trip. Like, you have to find an apartment and stuff. But I don't know if I'd stay longer than a year. I'd visit. Like, London is now on the list of, hopefully with every year I want to visit, at least for the next few years. Like, and then that's like how I view SF and DC. Those are like once every few months I want to go there and just keep those connections and relations. But yeah, I could see myself in London every year. I would hope so. I would hope I could align things. Yeah, and see more of it. Yeah. Okay, let's close out with our unforced error of the week. Again, not our original idea, stolen from the Players Box, which is an excellent tennis podcast, but something that you did this week that could have been avoided, but wasn't, and that is okay. So whoever has one can start.
I can start. So I don't know whether this could count as an unforced error, because I don't know whether it was unavoidable. But we, on the last day after our haircuts, ate dinner in China, and we were like trying to use all the money we can to
Yeah.
take advantage of it for services. Because one thing I'd wanted to do was get a massage, and Hillary kind of skipped it, but then we ate a huge dinner, and she's like, "Let's just go get that massage." Well, we ate a huge dinner and then got a huge dessert. She's like, "Let's go get that massage." So we went, got in the room.
This is your unforced error?
Endured what was probably the most painful beating of my life.
It was bad.
They were going to town on
It was
us.
bad. It was bad.
And then we don't know whether this was the case, but then the next day, I woke up with like my stomach not feeling good. I was feverish, feeling horrible, and that was the day we flew back. So I pretty much had a whole fever cycle on the plane, and it broke on my 13-hour ride back, the second flight. So that was a rough one.
Yeah.
If we could have avoided that, I don't know if it was avoidable. Would have liked to do that.
Lesson learned. Hell.
I'm thinking, Sam, do you have one?
Yeah, so we had a Make with Notion today. We actually launched our developer platform, and it's like our latest launch. We had watch parties happening this week across like 10 different cities around the world. It was great. And part of my role today was welcoming the community into our New York office. And I have access to the office and they don't. So when they get up to the floor, I like scan them in basically. So basically every time an elevator opened, I was like, "Hi, like I'm here for the Notion community. I'll let you in." And at some point, it's gone to autopilot. So inevitably, like when a group of Notinos, that's what we call employees, when they came out, I didn't recognize them. I just immediately went to them. I was like, "Hi, like bathroom's there, the closet's there," and they're like, "We work here." And there's just really no coming back. I'm like, I didn't have anything to say. You don't even say sorry.
You're no
like
longer
it's
working
just,
there.
yeah, it's just embarrassing, and it only happened once, thankfully. But it's, and then I made eye contact with like at least 50 people just walking back and forth, and I just, a lot of people saw my face today, and I hope they liked what they saw. It's all I can hope for.
And people on YouTube saw your face.
Yeah. My video I did for Notion got on their YouTube, and that was very full circle, having made a lot of YouTube videos in the past about Notion, and now, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
I have an unforced error. So yesterday I was coaching a group of kids, and with my assistant coach, I was trying to demonstrate a serving drill. The whole point, which I was emphasizing over and over again, I was like, "I don't care. You don't have to serve hard. You can serve it high. You just have to serve it at your partner."
Yeah.
I serve. It like literally flies outside of the court. And I'm like, "Oh shit." Keep in mind, it's a group of middle schoolers. You should probably not curse. So I both messed up, and then I emoted, and it was an unforced error on my part, and my assistant coach laughed at me.
Yeah.
But then we did it again, and I got it right the second time. And I told the kids, I was like, "See, failure is okay."
Yes, you turn it into a lesson, and that's all you can hope for.
Exactly.
That's all you can hope for. Okay, guys. Well, this has been Mindful Notions, helping young people do more with less. Checking in with me, Sam, Hillary, and Austin, and we'll have our fourth co-host Megan with us next time. But hope she is doing well. If you are watching or listening on Substack, please consider recommending us. It helps us reach new audiences. And if you're listening or watching on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, consider liking, subscribing, or giving a 5-star rating. Once again, helps us reach new audiences. I'll include Hillary's TikTok account in the description if people want to check that out. Also, my London piece. And until next recording or sooner, I'll talk to you guys then. So take care, be safe, enjoy the nice weather if you're in the States on the East Coast. And yeah, see everyone soon. Bye. Bye, guys.